My name is John McSweeney from Southern Response Earthquake Services. I'm the Customer Support Manager, and I'd really like to thank you for accepting the invitation to come along here this afternoon and hear from us at Southern Response. Now, the team that are here this afternoon, we have our Chief Executive of Southern Response, Peter Rose. We also have Liz Fife, who is our Manager of the Technical Review team. She is also with us this afternoon. And we have from our very close working partners, we have Eric Bird, who's a geotechnical advisor with Golders and Associates. Eric, welcome. And we have Ian Curry, who's a senior project manager with Arrow International, the company that we're working very closely with managing the major repairs and rebuilds for Southern Response. We have a number of other Southern Response support staff and Arrow International support staff with us as well, who are going to be available for support and to answer any technical questions that may arise. And at the end of the presentation, will be available for the one-on-one consultations if you wish to ask a question. We do talk quite a lot about, it's on the website or our website. It is www.southernresponse.co.nz, but if you just go to Google and Google Southern Response NZ, you'll find it, and there's a lot of good information there that's regularly updated. Now, if we can just move on to the agenda, please, Anna. We're all aware that, through the agenda there, that's, if you can just read those are the things that the topics that we're going to be covering this afternoon. As you can see, there's quite a lot of information. The welcome, the progress statistics, EQC issues, policies to inform you. The Chief Executive, Peter Rose, is going to take over from that point on, and then we'll go through in the first part through to the questions. And then after the question session, we'll come to part two, where it's going to be slightly more technical with what we're doing with our partner Arrow and Ian will be speaking about how things are going there. Peter will be back to do a summary, give you some more information. Liz will be speaking as well, and then we'll have a summary and further opportunity for questions. Now, we're all aware that there's been over 12,000 earthquakes here in Christchurch. They've caused much distress and complexity for many organisations that have never had to deal with so many house claims, including our own. We've got over 6,700 house claims that we are dealing with, and there's really no procedure for how such a large event was ever handled. The Insurance Council of New Zealand has just reported that this series of earthquake events have been the most complex insurance event in world history. It's hard to comprehend that that has actually happened here in Christchurch. Combined with the fact that there are two layers of insurance, as I'm sure many of you are aware. There's the EQC cover for land and part of your house, and then the private insurers step in over the top of EQC cover. Further complication that's quite unique in the world is that New Zealand and one other country, France, are the only countries in the world that have what is called open-ended replacement policies without a specific dollar limit, and that creates challenges for settlements. We've again had the multiple events, those 12,000 earthquakes. That's been very, very challenging, especially, as you know, for EQC and also for the private insurers. And then we've got what we've now found out about our unique soil situation here in Canterbury, and particularly Christchurch, where we now know about liquefaction and other sorts of things like that. At Southern Response, we've had to rise to that challenge. We've had to develop new systems, and although we're refining them and amending them as we go, and generally they've been working well, we do acknowledge that there have been some difficulties and some hiccups along the way, but we do hope, and we are trying our best to improve and make the claim settlement process smoother and quick as we can for you. And we hope that in this presentation this afternoon you will now have a better understanding of what we're doing, how we're doing it and why we're doing it. Southern Response has 2 offices. We have one in Auckland, and that Auckland office has a small team up there. They're predominantly dealing with the what's called the out of scope. That's driveway repairs, paths, fences, those sorts of things. And they also deal with the temporary accommodation claims under your contents policy if you have to move out of your house because it's damaged or being repaired or being rebuilt. That team up there deal with that. It was simply a logistical exercise because we didn't have enough space in Christchurch. That's why we have our people up there in Auckland working on that. Here in Christchurch, we have a very large team dealing with what is called the overcap claims, the overcap house claims, and just a few of the tidy up of final contents claims that need to be settled. But just like, and I think it's important for you to appreciate too that the Southern Response staff here in Christchurch dealing with your claims live and work in Christchurch. All of us live and work here. Many of our staff have also had their own personal EQC and private insurer claims. So there is an understanding of what Christchurch is going through. None of us just flew in to do this presentation for you today. This is just part and parcel of what we are all dealing and working with in Christchurch. Now I'm just going to give you some background to where we are about Southern Response, and as you can see, Southern Response was formed from the old AMI. It's a government-owned entity. It was formed from AMI's earthquake claims, all the earthquake claims that occurred up until the 5th of April 2012. That's what Southern Response's responsibility is. And our sole responsibility is to settle those earthquake claims. That's all we are here for. We are not an insurer, we're here to settle those claims. And the money to pay for those claims comes from a number of sources. The main one, where a lot of the money is coming from, is the overseas reinsurers from the reinsurance contracts that AMI had, the investments, the share and other portfolio of investments that AMI had, that is going to be liquidated to pay for these claims. There was some money from the sale of AMI to IAG, and of course, most importantly, there's the Crown support. That's the taxpayer support to Southern Response as a company to allow your claims to be paid in full and in full entitlement under your contract that you had with AMI. The expectation from the Crown support is that we're paying up to $400 million of taxpayer funds to complete the settlement of those claims. So its first in is not going to get settled and the last one is not going to be enough money left. The Crown is providing that support, but with that support, we as a company, and particularly it falls on the shoulders of the Chief Executive, is to ensure that the obligation to pay that money is done equitably, fairly and prudently on behalf of the taxpayer, the government, and in full entitlement only of your policy. Now, some of the statistics that we've got. Southern Response is the first. We call ourselves an insurer for the earthquake claims, but we're the first insurer of these earthquake claims to publish how we are going on the website, on our website. So it's public information. Some other insurers are looking to follow in our footsteps and provide information, but we are very open with what we're doing and where we're going. Some of the information there is not as good as we would like, but we're open about it and showing you where we are. The first thing is that 30% of the 6,700 claims that we have received, 30% of the 6,700 house claims we've received have been settled. They've been completed. Most of those people have bought another house or have decided to build their new house themselves, but they have been completely settled. Of our 6,700 claims on houses that we've got, 91% of those customers have had an offer from us, so they know where they stand. 72% of all of our customers have given us a decision as to how they would like their claim settled. They might not have completed it yet, but they've indicated what they would like. That's to buy another house, or build a new house themselves, or have repairs done, or have Arrow, our project manager, manage their new rebuild of their house for them. And in fact, 34% of our customers have chosen to build with us and our project partner Arrow to get their new house. 33% of those are now underway. Maybe not necessarily shovels in the ground just yet, but in the design phase and the consent phase and all those processes that you have to go through. And Ian's going to speak about that shortly. TC3 has been in the news, and it's there are certainly some challenges with the TC3 land area, but we have a strong strategy for settling customers with TC3 land, and 63% of our TC3 customers have now made their settlement election decision. And that's pretty much in line with the other areas around Christchurch. So we think that's very encouraging that people have considered their options, have made a decision and are ready to move forward. And we're gearing up to be able to work with you on that. As you know, EQC issues are challenging, and about a third of our claims have needed a joint review with EQC. We're well through these now, and we did prioritise the red zone customers with the EQC joint review because those people had a deadline on making their decision as to what they wanted to do. So that was why those people were prioritised at that time, and now we're working very strongly in the green zone to make sure that people in the green zone, including TC3, are able to make their decisions. If your house is confirmed as over cap, that's EQC have paid a cap, and EQC has paid it, the settlement of your claim will not be held up while we are working out the final details with EQC. And what we do in that case is we take a deed of assignment over your EQC claim, so that when it gets settled, we get the money that EQC pays, but we've allowed you to move forward in the meantime with your buy another house or getting your build underway or major repairs. It's quite a big challenge for us, and we've got 15 of our staff dedicated just to working on that issue, working through with EQC, and often it involves what's called joint inspections with EQC and our staff, and that's where Arrow, our partner, come in to help in that area and make sure that we can get resolution so that we can move you forward there. Now, for a number of policy-related matters, I would now like to invite Peter Rose, Chief Executive, to come forward and speak to you.
Thanks, John, and welcome here today, and thanks for coming. Most of you won't know it's John McSweeney's birthday today, so he's going to spend his all afternoon and all night here with our customers. John mentioned that life hasn't been perfect, and we continue to seek to improve the processes we follow. And it's not only processes we follow, but also the policies we set. As time moves on, we see the scope and opportunity and need for creating more flexibility for our customers, and we're continually working towards policy changes that satisfy our customers' needs and in fact facilitate things for us. I've got to be honest about that as well. So my first session, because I'm having another one later, is about new policies that we've been dealing with recently that you may or may not be aware of. And the first one is a new cash settlement option. You're aware that insurers have reinsurers, and we have to get approval from reinsurers to do things that are outside the policy conditions. As it turns out, for the earthquake period concerned, AMI had 42 reinsurers throughout the world. So in seeking to obtain some concessions to make changes for the benefit of our customers, we have to go to 42 reinsurers throughout the world. Anyway, it took a bit of time to get their input, translating some of our requests from English to German to other languages, French, etc., where these reinsurers reside. And so anyway, we do have a new settlement, a cash settlement option, and that's to settle it cash at the replacement value in defined situations. Unlike some other insurers, our principal objective is to repair or rebuild. It's not to pay cash. So the circumstances under which we pay cash are going to remain very limited. We're very cognizant of the fact that we want to ensure that that Canterbury is repopulated and not depopulated by paying cash and just having people desert, and that's the government's objective as well. So we're very cautious in the circumstances under which we are allowing cash. But I'm going to give you a few examples of the situations in which cash payments can be made, and you'll note that from the slide that the details themselves will be on our website in the next day or two. It's only going to affect relatively small numbers of our customers, probably 5 to 10 additional percent of people over and above those who can currently get cash. And the examples of the situations in which we will pay cash is in the case of a well-defined downsizing, such as a customer moving into a retirement village, where the cost of the retirement village, if it's a capital cost or even a rental cost, exceeds the value of the house. We'll pay the difference to the customer in cash if they're selling their house that's, let's say, totally lost. Second circumstance is a very difficult or lengthy builds due to the characteristics of the existing house or land, such as precarious hill builds, where it's much more in both parties' interest for us to pay cash and move on and let the customer deal with that themselves. Where the customer's land presents an unviable build, such as the very worst TC3 land, and that's only about 5% of TC3 land as we understand, we're prepared to make a cash settlement at replacement value in this case. And fourth, where the customer wants to offset the extra cost of land, the extra land cost in a house and land package within Canterbury. So we'll just move on to the next slide. And so this is our flexible house and land package options. In circumstances where our customers' land value has decreased, or in fact they wish to move into a property where the value of the land is greater than what they're going to get out of the land that they currently have. There's a whole range of circumstances under which that may exist. Southern Response will allow some of the rebuild money to go into the value of the land. So as an example, if the customer wanted to spend an extra $50,000 on land for whatever reason it was, and they were going to get from a full replacement of their lost house $400,000, we would provide a house for $350,000 and plough the other $50,000 for the customer into the land. So it's a way of creating a level of flexibility for the customer. It can apply in circumstances of relocation where the customer wants to take their existing house and move it to a new site, a more expensive land site. Moving into a newly built house where an investor provides the house for the customer and they move in at the time that the house is finished rather than having to move out in advance of a house being built. So they're basically buying another house, but the other house happens to be a new house. And the third situation is really on clear land where the customer simply wants new land and have Arrow or themselves to build a new house on that land, but where the value of the land is greater than the value of the land that they're relinquishing. So it involves no change in outlay for Southern Response, but creates a greater flexibility for the customers. And we've had circumstances where that's applied, and that was the reason we went to the reinsurers to ask their approval to be flexible, because that is not a policy condition to be able to carve some of the money of the house into the land, but they've given us that approval now. And in any sort of situation such as that, if you do have a mortgage, you'll probably need to get your bank's approval, because the value of the house going down may be something that creates some consternation with the banks. Another very topical subject is owner-retained houses. So we've seen quite a bit in the newspaper over the last few weeks, where there's been arguments for and against the notion of the owner being able to retain their house after it's been written off. We offer a replacement in return for salvage rights. So the new house that a customer receives from us, in terms of the replacement value, the offset cost is the salvage rights that we obtain from the house concerned, and it's not dissimilar to a car. If you've ever had a car that you've written off, the salvage of the car is retained by the insurer. The customer can buy that salvage back if they wish to, because they want to do something like rebuild the car to their own specifications. So that the issue with the house is no different to that. The insurer retains salvage rights by common law. And we understand the desire to retain homes, but we are cautious, and we appear to be more cautious than other insurers. We want to ensure a few things. Firstly, we want to ensure the house is structurally sound and healthy, and that people can occupy that house subsequently. We want to ensure that we obtain the salvage rights from that house. So if a customer wants to retain their house following the total loss of that house, and therefore they'll probably be moving to another site, and as often as not selling that house to a developer or something along those lines, then there is a cost. Firstly, the cost of the salvage, the value of the salvage we'll be wanting to get back from the customer. We'll also be wanting to get from the customer the cost of the technical services that are provided by structural engineers and health inspectors to ensure that the house fits into that category. We're determined as an insurer, and I think as a government-owned insurer, that we don't leave as a legacy rubbishy houses on land in Canterbury. So we have these precautions that we've sought to put in place to ensure that occurs. We've talked to the Department of Building and Housing, who have contributed somewhat to the initiative by seeking to ensure that new owners of houses who then rent these properties to tenants, that the tenants are well aware of the circumstances of the house concerned as well. And of course the last thing is we'd be advising AMI of that situation where a person wanted to retain the house rather than having it demolished, and the chances of getting insurance from AMI and therefore insurance from EQC for the house going forward are very low. So people just need to realise that if they do wish to retain a house following its write-off by Southern Response, there will be some hurdles to jump, and each case requires detailed investigation, and we have a case-by-case assessment of all those houses, and there's a hell of a lot of them that are emerging these days, I must say. Another policy issue is repair to rebuild and vice versa. In a perfect world, Arrow and ourselves, their original assessment in every case would have been accurate, and that is, if we declared a house a repair, we would have stayed as a repair. If we declared it as a rebuild, it would have stayed as a rebuild. But there's some circumstances, and the limited circumstances under which our original declaration will or may change. Again, only in a very small minority of cases, but I need to draw them to your attention. So the catalyst for those changes include the following: the EQC joint review. That's where ourselves and EQC disagree about the repairability of a house. We've typically said it's a rebuild. EQC have typically said it's a repair. In about 92% of cases, Ian, I think. In about 92% of cases, we're correct. Where EQC are of the view that it's a repair, we say it's a rebuild. When you have the joint review, in 92% of cases, our original position stands, but in 8% of cases it doesn't stand, and therefore the house is deemed to be repairable. Now EQC will say it's repairable, but in our case, our position is providing the cost of repair is more than 70% of the rebuild value, we'll still leave it as a rebuild. So more than 70% will deem it as a rebuild. But we have had circumstances where I don't know, must have been some of Ian's people were blind at the time, and it's the repair value was only about 30% of the rebuild. Something went wrong in our original assessment. It happens, unfortunately. So the EQC joint review is a catalyst, but we try and put safeguards in place to ensure that wherever possible we don't change our opinion, but we do have the taxpayers' funds in mind, and we can't just simply let them go on the demolition of a house which is totally repairable. The second circumstance is a customer-initiated review. So if a customer wants to initiate a review because they're disagreeing with our view on value, we basically say it's all bets off and we're going to start again, and we'll go and reassess it. And it's quite possible, and we don't do this for perverse reasons, but it's quite possible that house may be deemed to be repairable. A third situation is where an ARO audit is undertaken, and that's very rare that a circumstance arises where a place moves from a rebuild to repair. But so that can go either way. It can go from a repair to a rebuild, or a rebuild to repair. Clearly, the emotional side of it is generally when a house that you believe, or a customer believes, was a rebuild, we come back and say, sorry, it's a repair. In limited circumstances where people really want to keep their house because it's a heritage house or some such, they're delighted in that situation, but by and large, we know they're not. They want a new house. But so just drawing it to attention that situation does arise from time to time. So in those circumstances, the properties were assessed originally based on the observed damage and our understanding of the repairability at that time. But the situations where a detailed scope is prepared in conjunction with a builder, which may lead to a different outcome from our last assessment, typically repairs moving to a rebuild when some of the wall cladding is removed. It looks like it's repairable, but the thing's had it. So those circumstances, of course, exist. There's also other intervening factors which may alter our determination of repairability, particularly in the circumstances of an EQC joint review, and that's where methodologies for repair have moved on in the last couple of years, and there's been technology improvements, and particularly in terms of lifting techniques where the house can be lifted, foundation left there, removed, demolished, and a new foundation put back. Those circumstances do apply. We're not doing that in a systematic way, but in some circumstances where EQC and ourselves differ and their position prevails, that we might move towards that. But we have to be conscious of the health and safety of any building that goes on, so we don't just do that as a matter of course. And as I said, overall, this happens it's happening in a small minority of cases. The majority of our assessments remain the same. We've had 6,704 or whatever it was, John, 6,700 odd houses. I think that the number concerned is probably in the order of a couple of hundred concerns. So I hope that doesn't apply to your houses. But that's a situation concerned. Retaining walls is a vexing issue. AMI does not insure retaining walls. You can look through your policy, and sadly, we don't. AMI did not insure retaining walls. Other insurers do insure retaining walls. That just happens to be a fact of life that they're not. So we've got about 200 properties with retaining wall issues, and we expect that less than 20% of those cases will directly affect the repair or the rebuild. In those circumstances, sadly, it's going to be the customer's responsibility to replace that retaining wall in a way that the build platform can be made secure and sound for the rebuild of the property. In those circumstances, we would be suggesting that the builder that you choose to build your house should be the same builder you use for the retaining wall, but it's not our obligation nor our responsibility to be involved in the building of that retaining wall. As we said earlier about the house and land packages, with the bank agreement, some of the rebuild budget can be used for the retaining wall work. We don't mind that, so you get a lesser house in terms of value. The 400,000 becomes the 350,000. The 50,000 goes into the retaining wall if necessary. Again, I hope that doesn't happen to many of you. And where these are principally hill properties where multiple ownership issues relate to retaining walls, then collaboration between the various parties is necessary as well. And there'll be situations where EQC is covering the indemnity value for a retaining wall. IAG is covering the replacement cost of half the retaining wall because it's on one side of the property, and we're not providing any cover for the retaining wall. That's the reality. The next subject is cross leases, and that's something that Southern Response first identified probably about a year before the other insurers were alerted to it, but it's become big news with all of us at present. So cross lease residents share ownership of an area of land. They actually lease each other's homes from each other and the like. It's a phenomenon which has very high relative rates in Canterbury and not otherwise in New Zealand. You can probably tell from my accent I don't come from New Zealand. It's not heard of in Australia, the notion of cross leases. We understand that they're introduced to reduce the cost of the transaction for subdividing properties, but it's backfired big time well, certainly for insurers and to some degree for customers. So all the rights and obligations are shared, so that it's likely to be an obligation to repair or rebuild on the same footprint and to a standard that meets the approval of the other cross-lease owners, their insurers and banks. We've seen horror stories where there's been 3 properties. They may not even be attached, but they're 3 with cross-lease, and the brick cladding has effectively had to be removed from one of those properties, so it had to be replaced with other brick cladding. The owner of one of the houses whose bricks haven't been affected said, "You're not putting those bricks on, they're not the same as the previous ones." And the customer, or we ourselves, say, "But those bricks have been discontinued." And they say, "I don't care, you'll only be able to build again with the bricks that were there. I'm not allowing different bricks to apply." So we have horror stories like that, and where some customers are obviously going to be extremely cooperative with others, but we do know of situations where that isn't the case. And at this point of time, there is no resolution. The insurers are trying to work through a process to get cooperation amongst themselves, and I'm pretty confident that'll happen. The issue will be the customers, where customers are taking a dogmatic stand about it. We've put a paper to government to suggest in those circumstances where any customer is affected by a rebuild and they're in a cross-lease, that the cross-lease rights are extinguished, and that every one of the customers in that cross-lease aggregate have unit title placed on them so they can go and do their own thing. I suspect the government hasn't really warmed to it yet, because I don't think they're quite aware of the extent of this, but it is a very significant issue for all insurers and certainly for us. But I think when they do become aware of it, and I think they're going to come to the conclusion that this thing won't get resolved without some sort of legislative intervention, that might happen. But this is not a promise, this is just what I'm saying that we've sought to do to assist customers to be able to move forward against other residents who have been being dogmatic about it. But it's extremely important, if you are in a cross-lease environment, to consult other owners on your site and seek legal advice as well. But try and get the cooperation of the other owners. It's a huge issue. Okay, so the EQC land compensation and deeds of assignment. This is a relatively new issue that's emerging. John mentioned in terms of this being deemed to be the most complex rebuild in the history of the insured world. Also mentioned it's got something to do with the fact that there is insurance for land. No other country in the world, from what we understand, has insurance for land. In fact, the 42 reinsurers that we have, and there's a lot more in the world, when they were advised after this event that, "Do you know you're insuring land?" They didn't. They didn't realise they were insuring land. They know now. So there's a disconnect between what EQC believe, and they're probably right in terms of the legislation, what they believe they're liable to pay for land compensation, and what insurers need to put the foundations in place to build appropriate houses on land that's been damaged. So the land compensation should all be about damaged land. EQC has stated that they're going to begin their settlements between March 2014 and then complete them by the end of 2014. I said March 2013 to the end of 2014. We don't know the basis on which they're going to do it. They've put out some level of communication, but only some level. They haven't been very good in their consultation with the insurance industry at this point of time. Now, insurers do not insure your land. Have a look through your policy document, you won't find it there. But we may require the land to be remediated before we can repair or rebuild. Now, this is something that a number of customers don't like the notion of, but in fact we believe it's in their favour. So rather than waiting for EQC to pay for or do the land remediation, and we understand they're not doing land remediation, all they're doing is paying, we can address this when we build in most cases. There may be some where there's springs or whatever where the land is in such a poor case that we simply can't build at this point of time. if you assign your EQC land payment to us via a deed of assignment. We've spoken about a deed of assignment earlier in regards to your property. This is about your house, this is about land. It's up to you to choose. So, and over the page, if you choose a deed of assignment, we can progress the house without waiting for EQC to settle your land claim. If there is a shortfall in the EQC payment, we'll still do the required work. So if it costs us more than the cost of the value of the compensation we receive as a result of your deed of assignment, we'll still do the work. If you choose not to, we'll require you to remediate the land or have it done by EQC before we rebuild. And you can wait and learn more about your EQC settlement, and that may be up to the end of 2014. But we'll be unable to put you in the build queue, which Ian will be talking about, until such time as that's resolved. So our position essentially is, if you're getting land compensation for land that is relatively seriously damaged, we're not going to worry about getting compensation. We're only getting a couple of $1,000 because it's your rose beds have been smashed or something. But where it's significant, it's actually affecting the building platform. If you assign the money to us, we'll do the building regardless of the cost of it. If you don't sign it to us and choose to keep it, that money, then you have to do the remediation, because from our viewpoint, you're not just going to keep that money. We need it to compensate ourselves from the general shortfall we'll obtain as a result of the extra building work that we need to do. So the next issue is the firm but fair policy. Liz, who's going to speak next, she's from the area that was described as what's it called? The Technical Review and Resolution. You may know it as Pot 11. I know it as Pot 11. And so Pot 11 is the area it's responsible for dealing with disputes, and so the firm but fair policy applies very significantly to Pot 11. We think that the dispute area is going to increase. Liz will talk about that. It'll be the one growth area that Southern Response has over the next two or three years. As I said, Liz will talk through it. Our essential position is that we want to ensure that we maintain optimum customer service as people who wish to dispute with us go through that dispute process. We certainly don't want to screw the death out of them and just let them out let them rot until such time as they give up. Nothing along those lines at all. But we want to just make it clear that the Southern Response policy is to negotiate, that is to discuss in order to reach agreement, but it is not to compromise. And compromise is to provide concessions to reach agreement. So this bit about splitting it down the middle, we ain't doing that. We'll come to a position ourselves, which we believe is a fair position in terms of our fair but firm policy. We'll negotiate. You've got reasons to say, well, you've forgotten the gold taps, you've forgotten this and that. Sure, we'll be dealing with that. But if the objective is to say, well, I'd like another 200,000, let's split the difference, 100,000 each. No, that's not going to happen, not from us at all. And so the policy is going to be applied consistently. Liz will talk more about it, but it's important to know that, because there are people out there, lawyers and these claims advocates, who are looking at that approach, and well, you take your risk in going that way, because it could simply mean legal costs or whatever at your expense, rather than getting full value itself. Now I'll hand over to Eric Bird, our very skillful and dedicated geotech consultant, who's put us, I believe, in the forefront of the geotech initiatives that are existing around Canterbury in terms of other insurers. Eric.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, just 5 minutes on geotechnical progress, where we're drilling, what we're drilling, how many we're drilling, and where that data goes and what we use it for in terms of deciding what type of foundations we're going to put up on the rebuilt or repaired houses. So it's worth talking a little bit about the background to investigations and the requirements. Department of Building and Housing came up with the technical category zones, and they issued guidance about those various technical category zones and the types of investigations that are appropriate for the zones to characterise the ground. Essentially that's what we're trying to do, characterise the ground so that any repairs or rebuilds that are undertaken on that ground suit specifically that site. So we're not building inappropriate foundations for the conditions. So generally in TC1, TC2 and the Port Hills, That's shallow investigations, which are typically handheld stuff. So you'll see guys banging things into the ground and little hand augers. They drill down to about 2 to 3 metres. And that will provide sufficient information for repairs and rebuilds. In some cases in these zones where it's just a minor foundation repair, you don't necessarily even need that geotechnical information. In TC3 we're aware there's quite a lot more significant issues, so generally for a rebuild and for significant repairs we will be doing deep drilling in TC3. So this is the drill rigs that come onto your site and will go down between 10 and 15 metres, and that's to have a look at the liquefaction potential and come up with an appropriate solution. The caveat though is not every single TC3 site needs a drill rig with a drill hole on your site. Where the foundations have performed quite well, the DBH, now Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, has said, look, if the foundations performed well and only need minor repair, you can just do shallow investigation. You don't need to do any more. And also, as part of the deep drilling process, we get the data and we upload it to the Canterbury Geotechnical Database, so we ensure that we share that with all the other insurers and EQC, and so they're doing the same with their data. So over time, this database of geotechnical information will build up, and we'll be able to see what is on the next door neighbour's sites, and potentially we won't need to drill on your site if it's consistent. This table is just showing, like Peter said, just being open about our progress, where we are, how many we've drilled. So you can see the 2 columns there, number of sites investigated, so that's physically the number of sites we've either done the shallow testing or the deep testing on, and the second column there is number of solutions. So you'll see in TC1, TC2 and the Port Hills, the numbers match quite well. We've investigated the sites and we have solutions. In TC3 there is a bit of a mismatch. We've drilled over 600 sites, but we only have around 200 solutions. I'll talk about that in the next slide. And it kind of comes down to the way we're treating the various technical category zones in terms of the geotechnical input required and where and when it's required. So in TC1, 2 and the Port Hills, we will do what we're calling just in time. So basically when you come up to your spot in the build queue, which Ian is going to talk about in the next session, we will do the geotech ahead of the time where you go into design. So by the time your spot in the queue comes around to design, that geotechnical information is ready and waiting. So it's just in time, we're not pushing well ahead. In TC3, however, and I'm sure you've heard, there is quite a constraint on geotechnical engineers. It's not the most glamorous profession in the world, and the machinery used to drill the holes, typically there's not that much of it around. So what we've done is embarked on a bit of what we call the TC3 acceleration program, to aim to drill the majority of the deep holes that we need in TC3 by the end of 2013. But what that means is that in a lot of cases we'll be drilling well ahead of the position in the build queue for that property. So we don't necessarily at that point generate a solution because, as Peter alluded to, foundations change. We're developing new ones. The latest version of the guidance, which came out last week, has another new foundation in it that we will be applying to sites, and that will happen over the course of the rebuild. We'll come up with better, more efficient, more effective foundation solutions. So we will generate the foundation solution at the time required for the TC3, well, the build queue. We have a process that we've, that we've agreed to define the foundation type for each of the various rebuilds or repairs that we're doing. So in TC1 and 2 in the Port Hills, it's pretty, I won't say easy, but it's pretty simple. Once you've done the investigation, it's often very clear what the foundation type for the repair or the rebuild looks like. In TC3, however, we know there's quite a spectrum of foundation options and land characteristics. So there are some quite complex ones, some quite simple ones, and we have a process that we use the quantity surveyors, the Southern Response people, and a technical team, and the technical teams within Southern Response and Arrow to go through the main problem cases and come up with solutions for them.
Okay, so the first slide addresses the question, how does the build queue work? So initially you just want to explain why we've got a build queue and what it does. The build queue is the order we deliver our projects in. And when I talk about delivery, I'm talking about design and construction activities. So that's what the queue is about. We have recently changed our approach to queuing projects, and The reason for that is because we believe we now have a queuing system that is fairer and faster, and I'll talk more about that across this presentation. So we have geographic pods, and I think everyone should be familiar with which pod they're in. There's 10 of those, and they're based on geographic locations across Canterbury. And these are basically feeding into what we call the build queue. When we form the build queue, we take into account land and technical issues. So the land issues include the land zoning, which is the CERA zoning, the technical categories, which is the Department of Building and Housing, or now the MB technical categories, the observed land damage that EQC picked up on when they did their various site inspections throughout the various events, and also the observed underground services or infrastructure damage on your property. The technical issues I'm going to deal with in the next 2 or 3 slides, so I'll get to the detail on those technical issues shortly. We also take into account vulnerability, and this is primarily about health, age and displacement. The health is a case-by-case consideration by Southern Response. The age of you as the customer and whether you're displaced from your house or not, we actually understand already from the information we've gained throughout the settlement process. We also base the queuing order based on the customer decision order. So if you make a decision to build with Southern Response before someone else, then you will be in the queue before them, subject to these technical issues that I've talked about. We also take into account viability. Now, viability is, do we actually have a foundation solution in TC3 that is financially viable? And the guideline we use for that is if the foundation costs between 1/4 to 1/3 less than the cost of your superstructure, then we say that's viable. So superstructure is your house above the slab, the substructure or the foundation is the house slab and below. And we also take into account flexibility, the flexibility of you as a customer towards the design of your house in TC3. So these last items are just TC3 specific. And what we want to know there is, are you willing to consider design solutions that are going to provide a better foundation solution according to the MB guideline? And those issues include cladding type, the shape of your house, and also whether the garage is attached or not. So the build queue that we now look at, or the original build queue concept was based almost exclusively on the settlement order. So if you settled early, you were early in the queue. Now what that did was that meant that some of the more complex projects came forward early in our queue, and we became quite bogged down dealing with issues that I'll talk about shortly. So what we've done is we've modified the queue to take into account these various technical issues, and we also now take into account these technical issues through what we call a pre-design phase, and I'll talk more about that pre-design phase shortly. But that pre-design phase is there to try and sort out and resolve these issues, technical issues, that we wouldn't normally expect a designer or a builder to sort out in a residential construction project. So we believe the new queue gives us a good approach to equality and efficiency. So it's fairer because we are actually now taking queuing from the 10 pods, so we're looking at all of Canterbury rather than one particular area of Canterbury in order. And it's faster because we're actually prioritising the less complex projects earlier so we can get into those and get some work into construction. So the next slide is about the technical issues. So the technical issues are these issues I talked about in my first slide that we take into consideration as part of the queuing process. Now there's a list of issues there which is reasonably long, and Peter's already spoken to some of those. For example, EQC endorsement is an issue that we resolve in this phase. Cross-lease issues are issues we need to resolve in this phase before we get out to start designing and construction. Retaining walls, although as Peter said that's not as big an issue as we initially thought, but if you have a retaining wall in your property that has damaged and impacts the rebuild or repair of your house, that needs to be resolved before we get into the design of your house. Unknown fill is another technical issue. We have sites out there which has fill which is not engineered, so we need to understand what that fill is like and what sort of engineering solutions are required to actually rebuild or repair your house on that fill. Weather tightness is another one. If we are repairing your house, we do want to understand that there's no weather tightness issues relating to that house before you get in to do the repair. So those are the pre-design or technical issues. And again, I think it just goes to emphasise this is a very complex event we're dealing with. So the next slide. This is a graphical representation of what I've just been talking about, how the queue is formed. On the left-hand side, we've got our 10 pods, and the different length of these green lines here just indicates the number of people that are in each of those geographic pods or customers. The shades of green just simply indicates increasing complexity. So the less complex projects at the top of the list, and the more complex projects are at the bottom of the list for the pod. In the middle of the diagram here, we show the customer decision making. So if you are making a decision earlier in that process, you will be queued earlier. If you make a decision later, you will be queued later. Then on the right hand side, we show the 3 years that we're doing our primary delivery in, which is this year, next year, and 2015. And basically we've tried to indicate through the colouring there that we are focusing on the less complex projects early, but we're trying to get a good mix of bringing some of the complex projects up early as well. That's why we're showing those build queues as they are shown there. And those queues are in the 10 queue, in the 10 pods, sorry. So if I could just use an example or two just to try and talk through how the process works. If you're in pod 1 and you have a relatively simple project, you'll be sitting up here in the pod 1 list. If you settle early, if you have settled early, you will be queued early over here. If you're in pod 1 but a more complex project and you have settled early, you will be still queued early in the queue that we have. However, if you have yet to make a decision and you're in a complex project down here, you will be queued in 2015 as we have filled 13 and 14 already. The red box here indicates the tail end of our projects, which includes the inflexible and the non-viable projects. Now, the reason why we're showing non-viable later in the queue is we do believe technology will improve, as Eric has already spoken about, and better solutions will be available for those sites later on. So I hope that explains the gentleman's question that was about queuing before, but I'll be testing that shortly, I'm sure. So there is a website for Southern Response. John's spoken to that. And on that website there is a section talking about queue, so I suggest you go and have a look at that, and it might give you some more detail around the queuing process. So another key question we get asked all the time is, why is it taking so long? If I go and talk to a builder tomorrow, he'll tell me he can start building my house the day after. So why are you guys taking so long? So I want to talk about the pipeline that we've developed, which actually demonstrates how we need to step through the various processes to get to your construction phase on your site. So the steps are shown here on the slide, and I'll talk through the steps one by one in the future slides, but what this slide does show is there's about a 9 to 15 month duration for the whole of the pipeline to be completed. That's from when you make your decision, from when you start the pre-design phase to actually getting into and completing your construction phase. So on the next slide, the tap to that pipeline is the decision that you need to make, your settlement decision. When you settle, your queue position will be advised to you, and we're advising your build queue position in 6-month windows. So if we say you are queued for the first half of 2014, what that means is we will be starting the design and construction work on your project in the first half of 2014. But you do need to settle into the pipeline, so if you haven't settled, I encourage you to think seriously about doing that.
Could you just go over that again?
Sorry.
That last bit again.
You do need to settle to enter the pipeline, is what I'm saying, so I encourage you to settle earlier if you can. Yep. Right, so the next slide shows our pre-design phase. So this is a phase where you've settled. We now look at the technical issues on your site. Now there is potentially going to be a break between the date when you settle and when we start your pre-design activities, because we're going to do your pre-design activities just in time before we need to get into your design phase. So this is a phase where we resolve the technical issues on your site, and it's about managing risk, or more importantly, the future performance of your new house or your repaired house. The duration of the pre-design phase does vary depending on the complexity of the technical issues on your site. On the next slide, this slide, part of the pipeline, deals with design, consent and tender activities. This step takes 3 to 6 months to complete, depending on the type of house that we're building for you. Before we enter this phase, your PM will be in contact with you to let you know that we are entering the delivery phase, and we'll be needing to liaise with you on the design of your house. To give you an idea of progress in this step here, we have 765 customers who have entered this phase on the project to date, and we have about 238 construction contracts signed as part of this process. On the next slide, this is about demolition and relocation. So we're ready to get into construction. So we need to, for a rebuild, demolish your house. For a repair, we simply just need to, and for rebuild you need to find accommodation, and for repair accommodation as well. Now we will be aiming to provide 10 weeks notice for your need to find accommodation. So we think that's probably enough time to find accommodation, and the problem with advising you earlier is if we advise you too early in the process, the times we advise you may change, and you may have committed to some accommodation that might not be the right duration. To give you an idea of progress in this step here, we've completed 811 demolitions to date on the project. For the last slide here, the construction phase. So we've completed all those other steps. We're now into construction. Construction will take between 3 to 6 months on your house, depending on the type of house that we're talking about. And we have 158 customers who have reached this phase on the project. So that is a description of the steps on our pipeline, and the next 3 slides just demonstrate how the pipeline is filling. If you imagine a pipe filling with water, that's exactly what's happening with our project. So we're very busy at the start of the pipeline right now, but the construction activity is not great, and that's hence the question before, why can I see houses being built in my neighbourhood? But over the next half year, we will be gradually filling that pipeline, and by July, we'll be at full capacity for the full pipeline of the project.
Thanks, Ian. Now I'm going to move on to some other policy issues, but associated with the build itself rather than the insurance phase. First, I wanted to talk about the build contract. Southern Response's build contract is a 3-way agreement between the customer, the builder, and Southern Response. It's different to some other insurers' contracts, which is simply between the customer and the builder. So we've stayed connected to the contract in the circumstances where you choose to build with Southern Response. And as a party to the contract, if you choose to build with Southern Response, we'll work with you to resolve any issues that may affect the building on your site, as Ian's been talking about those issues. So by the time we hand the contract to the builder, the design and contract to the builder, it's what we call a clean build. So our customers, builders, and therefore the customers, will be receiving expedited work because there won't be all that work that needs to go on to overcome the barriers that Ian spoke about, the 20-odd barriers that may apply to some properties. So the build options, I spoke earlier about how we're learning as we go along, and one of the things we've learned is that the approach we took before in terms of the customer build, and that is offering a replacement, as you know, to policy conditions, but permitting allowable variations to occur, and that is where a customer said, we said the value is 300,000, 400,000 I say. The customer says, fine, but I don't quite want what I had before. That spiral staircase, I never liked that. I'd prefer an ensuite. And so we're working out the difference in the value between a spiral staircase and an ensuite. I'm using probably an outrageous example. And so there was a notion of allowable variations where the project manager was doing offset work between one particular feature of the previous house that was going to be replaced and the new house that the customer wanted. It was turning into quite a nightmare for us, and it was grinding things to a significant difficulty. So we've moved away from that. We've now moved to choices of building to budget or replicating to the insurance policy provisions, and in the next couple of slides I'll go into more detail about it. But if you've already started along the previous path, you can stay in that previous path if you choose to stay that way, but you can change to the new approach if that suits you better. So build a budget is establishing what the replacement value of the existing house is, and that's determined by a final DRA that's undertaken on your behalf. And the budget will be based on replacing the previous house in accordance with the policy conditions, a standard foundation up to the insured floor area specified in the policy schedule, council consenting fees sufficient to replicate the previous house, will pay for any enhanced foundations required at the site of the new house due to the technical category concerned, up to the insured floor area specified in the policy schedule. So if you wanted a larger house, but the enhanced foundations were required, you'd have to pay the extra pro rata cost of the additional foundations for the floor area that was greater than the previous house you may have had. And we'll also, if time progresses, we'll also review the budget that's been established on the basis of escalation that's occurred in regards to labour costs and materials. So at any point of time, if you've made your decision and the figure's 400,000, we can't get around it in terms of the pipeline to 2016, then we'll do escalation for you to escalate the value of the build up to whatever the current cost should be from the point of view of government indices and information from our quantity surveyors. There'll be reasonable and necessary costs on top of that, such as demolition, engineering and survey fees, so that they'll be paid as well. And if it was an architecturally designed house, we'd be paying for architectural design for the new house. In these circumstances, Southern Response will choose the builder. If we choose a builder that's not acceptable to the customer, say it was your divorced husband, for example, Southern Response will make another choice, but we will ultimately make the choice. We'll take into consideration, of course, any views that the customer may have regarding the builder. So the thing about, I should just stay back there for a second. You become responsible for the cost of the build. So you've been given a budget being the value of the replacement house, escalated as necessary. You say, fine, that's $400,000 in my bank, essentially. If you choose to do something different, you choose to make it bigger or whatever you choose to do, that becomes your responsibility. So the cost of the house becomes your responsibility after that time, even though we're funding it up to the full replacement value. And so replicate the policy is the specific policy response under the AMI insurance policy, and that essentially says we will replace the house to the standard and conditions and shape it was before, but using current construction methods and commonly available building materials. It's more precise. You get exactly what you had before, but ensuring that it's up to date with consenting requirements, etc. There'll be no flexibility in requests for layout changes. So if your toilet was down in the back fence, I don't think it is these days, but we'd build it with a toilet in the back fence. But the issue about that is the cost is not your concern. If we've happened to get it wrong, or there's extra escalation or whatever, that cost is our responsibility because we're rebuilding your house. Whereas in the first case, build the budget, you've essentially taken the money, put it in your bank, which is still our money until it's spent, but you're responsible for the cost. So there's, I guess you'd say, either way, there's risk, but in one case, a great deal of flexibility. We've found our customers want that level of flexibility, but in other cases, if people wanted to remain very risk averse, they'd take the replicate the policy approach. So that's one of the changes that we've made in terms of the build, and we think we've done it. We believe we've done it for the benefit of customers and responding to customers' needs, and also to ensure that the difficulties we had with responding to customers under this allowable variations approach has been overcome. So out of scope claims, I think you probably all know the term, but as John said earlier, they're the claims for your property that are outside the scope of EQC, so that the driveways, the footpaths, the fences, the swimming pools, etc., etc. We have or had around 23,000 of those claims. And if there's also an out of scope, an over cap claim with it, then the out of scope claim. So if your house is destroyed, we'll deal with the footpath along with the house, of course, and that's dealt with as if it's an over cap rather than an out of scope claim. So here we're talking about exclusively of cases that are out of scope, where generally the damage to the house is below the EQC cap. That'd be a typical case, but there's damaged footpaths or drives and the like. If that's the case and there's no overcap claim, the work will be dealt with exclusively by a out-of-scope team, of which John Sheridan is the team leader from Arrow, here today to provide any assistance later on in terms of discussions about it. The approach we're taking to outer scope is that they're currently being assessed on a suburb by suburb basis, and we're saying in terms of the riskiness of the land from a desktop review we've done, and we've moved from the north to the south, and we're moving from the west to the east. So at this point in time, the east isn't being favoured. There is not 10 pods. There is a single pod throughout Canterbury, so we're moving systematically through Canterbury in regards to the outer scope. But one thing I would say, there is, again, as John spoke about earlier, about vulnerability. That is the maybe it was you, Ian, was it? Who spoke about vulnerability? Yeah, Ian, I'm sorry. The issues of vulnerability, that is the age of the person or their health, etc. That'll be taken into account in terms of expediting and jumping ahead if that's necessary. We've assessed 6,500 of the 23,000 so far. Where we're expecting the completion of all assessments by mid-2014, we've completed 3,200 odd properties to date in terms of the outer scope work, and the expected completion of construction is mid-2015. Now, one thing that's going to assist us there is that we've made a policy change supported by our board to provide cash settlements for outer scope claims with a repair value up to $20,000. So customers who say, well, I prefer to do it myself, or I put the money in the bank for a while and do it when I feel like it, then you can do that. You can either approach us directly by ringing us on our phone number and getting through to the outer scope IVR key, and talk to our Southern Response people about expediting it through a cash settlement. Someone from Arrow at the appropriate time will come and see you and work up a cash settlement figure if that's what you want. We will not be initiating cash settlements as such. It'll be where customers want a cash settlement themselves. So over to overcap repairs. It's really the same process for repairs as for rebuilds, including the pre-design and the build queue. The 10 pods exists again. The difference between a repair and a rebuild is all repairs will be replicating to policy, which basically means returning your house to the condition it was before, the design it was before, but using, where necessary, current common building materials and current building methods, and also ensuring we comply with current consenting standards. There'll be fewer pre-design issues to address because we're essentially repairing an existing house. And the methodologies and technology available to us are improving all the time. As I said earlier, some of the reasons that we're having to find that EQC happen to be right is because the methodologies and technologies that they've adopted, such as lifting, that weren't available 2 years ago, are available now. So that's improving all the time, and so the ability for us to repair is being enhanced all the time. But we're not doing it for just for the sake of it. Our principal objective is to stick with what we had in terms of the original assessment, except in those exceptional circumstances I spoke about before. Now it's my pleasure to call on Liz Fife, who's the head of our Pod 11, to speak about disputes and dispute management.
Quite bright, isn't it? Hi, everyone. As John stated when he opened the meeting today, that there's been over 12,000 events have hit Canterbury. So it's made trying to get through this entire process with the earthquake events quite a complex situation. We have got multiple insurers involved, both EQC and the private insurers. There's the EQC, the land remediation that's required, makes everything very complex. So each one of your claims has now become very unique. So very difficult for each one to be able to get through settlement. What would once have been a simple claim, obviously, is now something we've got to work through, a different process that you're currently working through your own teams with at the moment. Unfortunately, some do end up with disputes, and that's when they come through to our pod. Southern Response seeks to be fair but firm in their approach when we're settling claims, as Pete spoke about before. Our role is to ensure that you receive a settlement that's as per your policy contract that you took out at the time you took your insurance with AMI. So that's one of the things we're very careful about within the team. Once a position has been established with Southern Response and we've got sufficient confidence in the position that we've got, it will be maintained. As Peter explained, Southern Response are prepared to negotiate, but we won't compromise on the settlement. They will always be fair but firm and to your policy contract that you took out. Of the customers that have made decisions with Southern Response, at the moment we're currently sitting at a little over 3% of those that are in dispute. So within the team we have approximately 110 claims at the moment, with 6 team handlers working on those. We do anticipate that that is going to grow as we move through the process and people are wanting to move forward with settlement of their claims. We're looking at it approaching approximately 7.5%. We will be resourcing the team to make sure that we've got adequate staff to work along with your claims. They will be the brightest and the most customer focused staff that we've got within our teams that will be selected for that position. Our intention, even if you're in dispute, is to continue to service our customers to the old AMI standard of customer care. So you'll be treated the same as you were as if you're still with AMI insurance. The Technical Review and Resolution Team, or the Review Panel more commonly known as Pod 11, have been working since April 2011 when Southern Response brought out AMI insurance. Pod 11 also deals, 2012? I'm a year ahead. I've actually been with the Southern Response and with AMI since the 5th of September 2010, so I was one of the first emergency responders. I've been here for a while, so time tends to fly past. Pod 11 also deals with claims where people will get a public loss adjuster involved, so they're people like the World Claims, Risk Worldwide, KSL. We do deal with all of those claims. A lot of them we have found from our experience is that the public loss adjuster will not reflect the policy and they generally overinflate to give the customer a false expectation of the value of the home or what is actually required. They'll also expect to have a cut or percentage of the settlement for the work that they've done for you. They are in fact only taking payment of a settlement that you would have otherwise been entitled to. We're happy to deal with the public loss adjusters, but we will not compromise to reach the settlement. You will only receive your correct policy entitlement. Claims come to Pod 11 when the claim settlement team has been unable to resolve or unable to settle your claim downstairs. As we've not previously had any involvement with your claim, for us to be in a position to fairly review everything that's gone on, we've got to completely start from the beginning. That review process, depending on the amount of communication that you've had, the amount of DRAs that have been done, site visits, engineers visits, council may have also been out, can take up to 6 months to do a complete full review from the start through to a resolution process where we can offer you another settlement offer if that's required and be able to allow you to progress your claim. We understand that it is quite a lengthy period and it's another delay that you're probably not looking forward to, but unfortunately it is part of the process to be able to get the correct information for you. At the moment, obviously builders, engineers and council are in high demand with rebuilding of Canterbury itself, so being able to get their services to come out to do other site inspections or assist with the review of your file if there's technical information required. They're booked out months in advance, so that can add additional delays to that. The types of disputes that come through to Pod 11 can be for reasons of incorrect scope of the DRA, disagreement with a repair strategy that's been proposed for your dwelling, time delays that have happened up to date, slow, unclear or incorrect communication that you may have received during the settlement process. That could either be from Southern Response, from Arrow or from councils or external agents. The settlement figure itself may also be in dispute. This is where Pete was talking about if you're wanting a customer initiated review, the complete offer would be withdrawn off the table and we start from scratch. So that's a complete new DRA through to pricing and engineers report on that. So once again, that can be another delay. But if you're wanting to go through that, we're more than happy to assist in that way. There's also problems come to Pod 11 when the EQC process has not been clarified. That's where EQC have not given full ownership of your claim to Southern Response. Because of the multiple events that are in place, even if they have paid one CAT to you, they may decide to reassess the total amount of damage and apportion it over any one of the major 4 events that we've had to date. They can recall your claim if they choose to do so. So the endorsement process is very important for us to get resolved to allow us to fully assist you with settlement of your claim. Southern Response are a member of the Insurance and Savings Ombudsman Scheme. So if we're unable to resolve your dispute, we can offer you a letter of deadlock, which will allow your dispute to be independently reviewed by the Insurance Ombudsman's Office. There are limitations to the scheme, and these are explained on the Southern Response's Resolving Your Disputes website. It's also in our brochure that's on the Southern Response website, or you could collect one from your claims specialist that's been dealing with your claim. To date, we've had 19 cases that have gone to the ISO from Southern Response. 8 of these related to our overcap properties. There was 1 for out of scope and the remaining with the temporary accommodation or loss of rent. 12 of those claims had Southern Response's position upheld. 6 of them are still under review, and 1 was resolved favourably for one of our customers following the receipt of a builder's quote, which showed that there were some inconsistencies. Disputes outside the jurisdiction of the ISO can be heard by the local disputes tribunal, the district court, high court, or the appeals court. A copy of our Resolving Your Disputes brochure is available on our website, or as I said, you can get one from your claims specialist if you'd like to have anything reviewed or taken further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Hope that information helps you. Now, just to summarise the formal part of the presentation, if you see, there's many technical issues that we all have to work through, and it's really important that you do get the information that you need to be able to make your decision. And once you've got all of the information, then look at the options that are available to you in your circumstances and make your decision as soon as you're comfortably able to do so. Then you can either be booked in line for repair or into the queue, or whatever other option is available to you. I hope it's comforting for you that over 70% of our customers have already made a decision on their house claim settlement going forward. Not all those houses have been able to be, all those claims have been able to be settled, but a decision has been made. If you're a rebuild, think carefully about the new option now of replicate to policy, where you had the same as you had before, but with new materials and new materials to and construction methods. Or the other option, build to budget, where you've got a lot more personal flexibility. You know the dollars that you've got to spend, just like if you were normally going to build a house. That's how much money you've got available to spend, and then you have got a lot more choice and flexibility in the way that you have your new house designed. Now, whether you are a repair or a rebuild, consider your temporary accommodation requirements. Southern Response does not specifically arrange or provide the temporary accommodation, but we will pay for it in line with your policy entitlement. So, as Ian indicated before, when you get to the stage about 10 weeks, is it 10 weeks, Ian? 10 weeks before construction or repair is ready to start, that's about the time that you need to start looking. And if you do look too much earlier, places are not going to be held for you or available. And if you haven't got enough time, then it's going to be very awkward to get it. There is a lot of pressure on temporary accommodation, but plan for it, and so that you know when you need to go in and can have that arranged for you. And just also think about, for your temporary accommodation, your pet requirements. Some places will allow you to have pets and others won't, depends what the pet is, but there's costs there within your temporary accommodation that can be apportioned out if perhaps a cat or a dog needs to go into a cattery or a kennel for that length of time. There is your temporary accommodation costs can be apportioned for that to happen. So just think about all those sort of really practical things that you need to consider. So I'd just like now to thank you for your patience and respect that you have shown to the presenters this afternoon. We really do hope it's been helpful for you.